Wednesday, March 6th, Board of Forestry Hybrid Public Meeting. For the record, I'm Jim Kelly, Chair of the State Board of Forestry. The board will be having a two-day meeting and plan to live stream our proceedings on YouTube. To make sure our viewers online can follow along with our virtual proceedings, I'll go over some meeting housekeeping tips, as always. Everyone participating in the virtual and physical meeting room, please silence your cell phones and try to limit background noises. For online participants, remember to mute yourself when you are not speaking and disable your video when not presenting or providing public comment. We ask everyone participating today to state their names before speaking. Those listening online can track our commentary for the meeting recording. If you experience technical issues in the online meeting room, use the chat function on Zoom to connect with our ODF hosts during this event. As a reminder of our general order of operations, after an item is introduced, I'll invite the presenters to begin. Board members, if you have any clarifying questions, please raise your hand and I will call on you. Presenters, we will do our best to ask questions one at a time. After a presentation, we will open the floor for board discussion and additional questions. Our two-day agenda is filled with items that will inform and provide department updates as well as highlight board committee work. Over these 2 days, we have 3 decision items in front of the board. One in block form, that's the consent agenda. And another for item number 3 and for item number 7. After information has been presented, we move to hearing from the public, then shift to discussion space, where the board can ask further questions or present a motion for deliberation before coming to a vote. Any questions so far? To ensure the board can conduct all the items on the agenda in a timely manner, we reorganize when public comment is received during a public meeting. The former public comment provision has shifted to become its own item called public forum. This item allows members of the public to share their perspectives with the board about items not on the agenda or regarding the informational items included with the meeting agenda. For testimony, we will still welcome written remarks and want to hear from the public before a decision item is deliberated by the board. Therefore, no more than 30 minutes will be provided for live verbal commentary per decision item. We are instituting this format for the remainder of 2024, and for your awareness, the locations for the Board of Forestry meetings is included on our calendar posted on our meeting webpage. For today, the public can offer remarks on item number 2 and number 3. When you come or join us via online, please provide your name. Additionally, identify the agenda item or the subject you are remarking on. The board did receive a high level of interest in this week's decision items, so we are asking all testimony providers to limit their comments to 2 minutes. We do understand that this is not a lot of time. If you'd like to share more information with the board, we recommend sending in written testimony for the March 2-day meeting. To enter it into the record, please send it in all your comments by March 20th. Any questions? Hearing none, I will perform a roll call to confirm quorum can be met for today's items. Liz Akpawa.
Chair Kelly, I'm present.
Carla Chambers.
Here.
Ben Doimling. Here. Rhonda Ferrari.
Here.
Joe Justice. Here. Brenda McComb.
Here.
And I am here as well. Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda items. Would anyone like to declare a conflict or an appearance of a conflict on the presented items? Okay, if hearing none, would somebody like to present a motion? Carla.
I'd be happy to present a motion to accept the consent agenda, but I have a comment.
Go ahead.
And it's just under the financials. James, where are you? And Cal. I just want to bring to the attention just how important I think our accounts receivable situation is. And Cal, we talk about this, but you know, Our cash position is just 37.5 million. And we're sitting here at 46.6 million of accounts receivable with another 105 million that needs to be invoiced. So we're sitting here at 152 million that should be in our checking account today. And I know all the problems, but I've heard these problems and we just have to tackle this. And coming into fire season, which we don't know if that's sooner or later, but we're going to need this cash, and just how important cash flow is for this agency. I just want to elevate that to top of mind priority. And so I so move Jim to accept this.
Thank you, Carla. I understand you're going to be meeting with some of the key budget people for the state soon, so look forward to that happening. Do I have a second for the motion?
Chair, I second that. Ben Doimling seconds.
Ben Doimling, so. All right, with that, I will, with the motion has been made by Carla Chamber and seconded by Ben Doimling, and we'll unmute and prepare. I'll do. We'll run through this. Liz Powell. This is a vote on the consent agenda item.
Thank you. Yes, aye.
Okay. Carla Chambers,
Aye.
Ben Doimling,
Aye.
Chandra Ferrari,
Aye.
Joe Justice,
Aye.
Brenda McComb,
Aye.
and Jim Kelly is an aye as well. With that, the motion has passed that we have to accept consent agenda items. And we'll move on to item 1, State Forester and Board Member comments. So we'll first welcome State Forester Cal Mukamoto. And Cal, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Chair Kelly. I think today I'm going to start, I have a couple of things, and Derek's actually going to help me out. Derek Wheeler is our legislative and coordinator. But to begin with, you're going to be receiving another request. It's that time of the year where we have the annual board evaluation, performance evaluation. So that'll be coming. What that is, the request for the board to complete their annual performance evaluation on board governance. You know, what it is, I think you'll remember this. It's includes a 15 standard best practices and that'll be sent to you. And this is because the Oregon State Legislature has defined a key performance measure for all enterprises to do this with their boards, those that have boards. And we will need to have that completed by mid-April when it does receive. And we'll communicate the results back to the board. So that's that. Now for something more interesting. That may be the most. Derek, why don't you come forward? Derek Wheeler is going to give you an update. We're looking at sine die. Is that happening today, Derek? Well, first off, for the record, all I have to say for my name, I'm Cal Mukamoto, State Forester for the record. RE. And oh, we got James there too. We got James and Derek. Why don't you introduce yourselves?
Chair Kelly and State Forester Mukamoto. My name is Derek Wheeler. I'm the legislative coordinator for the Department of Forestry. And to answer your question, Cal, no, we are not looking at signing it today, but it is coming soon. So the legislature is happening at a furious pace at the moment. Bills are moving through Ways and Means as we speak. And
Hey, Derek, would you allow James?
Oh,
why don't you
sure.
introduce yourself real quick.
Good afternoon, Chair Kelly, State Forester Mukamoto, and members of the board. I'm James Short. I'm the agency chief financial officer.
So, yeah, things are moving very briskly right now. So we don't have any finalizations, but I did want to give you guys a temperature of the room as the legislature has progressed. The session itself has been dominated by two concepts. The first being the governor's housing priority bills. It's a trio of bills with a total of it's about $376 million in total funding for those housing bills. The second concept is how to address Measure 110. And what they have landed on is they have decided to recriminalize drug possession. So those two concepts have dominated the discussion. They've also dominated the budget of this legislature. So I'll quickly move to a few of the bills. I guess before I do that, I would say, Ways and Means is moving furiously right now, both in the Subcommittee of Capital Construction and Ways and Means proper. And the bills will then have to go to the House and Senate floors for final passage. We're looking at a target date of this Friday to finish. Constitutionally, they have to end by Sunday, but none of the legislators want to give up their weekend for that. So look for Friday being sine die. So I'll direct a few of the policy bills that have moved that have a nexus with the department. I'll start with HB 4016. This was a omnibus bill that made changes to the fire hardening grant program, and it had sections that fixed the prescribed fire liability program. You may recall last year that there was a last-minute amendment to Senate Bill 80 that sort of gummed up the works with our prescribed fire liability initiative, and this Bill 4016 made that right. That bill passed yesterday. Moving on for bills for us is House Bill 4045. This definitely hits our workforce. This lowers the normal retirement age from 60 to 55 for members of the police and fire public service retirement plan, or OPSERP, the new acronym for me. So that would qualify for members who retire from service and who have worked the last 60 months, so 5 years in fire. So we would be looking at members who qualify for this program, who have worked 5 consecutive years. They would now be eligible for retirement at 55. The last bill that is that bill passed yesterday as well. The last bill I'd point out is Senate Bill 1576. This is another omnibus bill, but one of the provisions has to do with recreational immunity. This could be a big topic. It grew out of a court case out of Newport where a woman was injured on a bridge. I believe it was county or city owned, and that would have typically fallen under the umbrella of recreational immunity, where she couldn't sue the city or county in this case. However, they successfully argued that because she was not using the bridge for recreation, she was using it as transportation to and from, that it didn't qualify as recreational immunity. That sort of takes the paradigm of recreational immunity and leaves it in question as to what that actually constitutes. And so that leaves cities, counties especially, and programs like us. We have state forests. What are we going to do with recreational immunity? So part of 1576 had to do with changing some of those provisions. They included walking, biking, and running as constituting recreational immunity. And but it's not a solid fix. As I mentioned, the case revolved around the intent of the person, and this bill does not touch on the intent. What constitutes recreation will still need to be discussed in a work group, and it's being envisioned that a work group will come up with a more solid recreational immunity solution for next session. So those were the three policy bills that have moved forward. I'd like to point out that the session began with 3 wildfire funding bills, and I'll just touch on 3 of them, on all 3. The first was Representative Evans brought a duo of bills that would have sent through a referral to the voters a property tax increase, and the property tax would pay for wildfire funding. That bill did not have a very good public hearing at first because local governments especially saw raising property tax as sort of a threat to their own funding model, and so that did not move forward. The second wildfire funding bill was initially proposed by Senator Golden, and this was to replace the harvest tax with a severance tax. This was also envisioned to be a referral. Due to legislative constraints, it would have needed a 3/5 majority, so that was a hill too high for that bill, so it was pared down to a study on the severance tax. However, that bill did receive a public hearing and also did not move forward. That leaves one last bill in terms of the wildfire funding landscape, and that would be Senator Steiner's proposal that we've been working on since the offset was not funded last year. However, we ran into a technicality last night. I would say that the bill had two priorities. It was to address the complexity of the system, to decomplexify as the terms were used, and to make landowner rates smaller. That was the two guiding principles of this. The bill had continual adjustments as it moved through. However, as was found out last night, one of the provisions of the bill would have taken money from the Oregon Forest Land Protection Fund and moved it over into, among other things, Oregon Department of Forestry Administration. We found out that the Oregon Forest Land Protection Fund is a trust fund. And by moving that money over for any other for any other purpose would be a constitutional violation. And so as this bill moved through the process, that got missed until Legislative Council caught that yesterday. A very unceremonious way to end such a long project, but it got caught by a technicality and is functionally dead. There are, of course, two ways that could have been handled. We could have taken that part from the fund and sort of found other ways. But unfortunately, the bill that came before us was sort of a mosaic of things where rates and funds and stuff were all very closely intertwined. And if you were to take one piece out of that puzzle, it gummed up the whole system. And so we wouldn't have time to fix that by Friday. And so the other choice would be to replace that $3.5 million with general fund. However, we are in a very tight fiscal environment, and Senator Steiner didn't believe that even getting $3.5 million backfilled from general fund would have passed. So that left her no option but to leave the bill behind. I would note that there is a budget note attached to one of our funding bills. Well, one of the Ways and Means bills now, and this budget note is specifying that the Department of Forestry and Oregon State Fire Marshal will be working collaboratively to find a broader wildfire funding fix, to have recommendations for next year's legislative session. So that is our next to do, is to get together with State Fire Marshal and look at a broader fix. I will also point out that due to funding constraints, we tried very hard to resurrect the idea of a landowner offset in this package, or at least backfill it. But they couldn't find $3.5 million for 4133, and they couldn't find $7.5 for a landowner offset. So that also will not be going forward. A lot of bad news, and my apologies there, but I will say, as we've seen through the Ways and Means process, most of the amendments were populated last night, and we're still going through them. They are being voted on this morning and again this afternoon. We have been made whole through our requests. Our fire season requests have all been funded. Our federal fund limitations for urban and community forestry, everything has been funded. Just additional asks have not. With that, I'll leave this update and open it up for any questions for me or James.
Just to clarify process here, and this, because it's a little unusual, this seemed like an important topic. So Cal said, is it okay if he could kind of turn over his opening comments so that these guys could fit in a quick update for us all? But if anybody's got any questions, and if not, we'll continue to have any other opening comments by board members. Okay.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you for the presentation. This is something entirely different. It's just a comment on one of the consent agenda items, the Tribal Working Relationships and Activities Report, which is great. Good to keep up to date. I think given the discussions that we had in Medford, having more regular updates would be good for me. I see a few heads nodding, but also given the results from the DEI survey of the agency, having regular updates from the DEI representatives as well would be helpful.
Cal, go ahead.
Brenda, that's great. I have requested that we come up with an annual plan and we will include those dates in our schedule. I have the tribal liaison sitting right there. Okay.
Other opening comments, board members? Not seeing any. I did want to recognize, make sure that everybody knows that our wonderful board administrator, Hillary, is going to be leaving us. Hopefully, I know she's desperate to get away from us, but hopefully, she's going to be stuck with us for a while. Luckily, ODF is not losing her. She's moving on to the urban forestry program. Obviously, I guess, you know, you can move on to almost anywhere from board administrator, and it's a much better job. Is that right? ODF.
I'm unsure how to respond to that.
Hillary, it has been wonderful to have you since day one that I came on this board as a board member, and with, you know, so little knowledge of what was going on, and you've held my hand and the hand of all of us as board members, and then and that doesn't touch the amount of hand holding needed for a new board chair and all of that. And you've been there every step of the way, always ahead of me and the rest of us in terms of figuring out what we need before we ask for it. I think that's something that you have specialized in. And I just can't tell you how much we have appreciated the wonderful support, both professionally and as human beings. You are there, you know, we just can't say too much about how much we appreciate the work that you've done. And anybody else would like to add to that?
Hillary, congratulations and thank you, thank you, thank you, all you've done.
Yeah, thanks, Hillary. I mean, when I first got on the board, I mean, Hillary, your attention to detail is fantastic, and it's managing this, and it's a big job, and I'm sure you're going to be wildly successful in your other roles.
We're going to really miss you, Hillary. Your replacement has really big shoes to fill. So congratulations.
I have to say it too. Congratulations, Hillary. I'm mixed emotions right now because I'm really excited for your new position. But in all honesty, I don't know what I'm going to do because you really keep me on track on quite a few things in a very pleasant manner too. Even when I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do, I feel like you're really encouraging at the same time by telling me to get my stuff done. So thank you. Hillary, you're my second memory and my better memory often. And just thank you for taking my calls when I finally get home and I need to tell someone, I'm here, I'm back safe, I made it over the summit. I always text Hillary and say, I'm here. Sign me off. Thank you for everything.
Hillary, you have been wonderful to all of us as board members. One, keeping us on the computer, which is probably the hardest thing for half of us. And secondly, it's amazing to me how we have over 800 people testify and you never lose your cool. You know, it's just a gift that you have. So we will miss you.
Thank you. I really appreciate all those kind words and statements. I swear I didn't pay you at all to make any of those. Josh, I swear. But no, I just want to do a friendly reminder. I'm still within the agency. I'm still going to be working with the board and supporting the state forester however I can to make sure the agency is still successful. But you're not losing a board admin. You're just gaining a urban community forestry program administrator. So it's it's pretty exciting. So bittersweet. I'll miss you as well as the public we get to interface with. So thank you so much for being so amazing and wonderfully passionate individuals. Thanks.
All right. You bet.
Yes, and I'm lucky because we keep Hillary in the organization, but you know, she's moving into urban and community forestry, and that's going to gain, I want to see that area gain importance, and we have good personnel there right now, and adding Hillary to that's going to add even better. We'll be able to hopefully expand that program. But, and it's important. But Hillary, it's not so easy transferring, so we're gonna be grabbing you for a while. So, you know, the word irreplaceable starts coming into my mind, but anyway. Okay, thank you, Hillary.
I'll be back tomorrow.
Okay, everybody. We're going to move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the public forum. We will ask that everyone in the queue, whether online or in person, not to exceed their allotted time, in this case of 3 minutes. As a reminder, this forum is reserved for remarks on information items and topics off the agenda. I ask that each of you, before you start, that you state your full name, the topic or agenda item number you are commenting on, and any associated affiliation if you are representing a group or organization. A timer will be provided to track your time, and each commenter will be called on by the board administrator proxy. With limited time available, anyone who exceeds their time will be prompted to provide a closing statement and muted. With that, Megan, are you a proxy?
I am.
Okay, great. Are we ready to start with public comment?
Yes, Chair Kelly, we are ready to begin. Board Chair Kelly, we have 2 in the queue who have signed up to provide commentary today. Everyone in the queue for item 2, thank you for joining us. To help us stay on track, I will list names in a set order and call on each of you to begin your testimony. As testimony providers we don't have any testimony providers today in person, so we just have the 2 online. And when you begin, a timer will be displayed for 3 minutes. When you see the timer run out, we ask you provide your closing statements. And then we will start in that order online, starting with Carol Valentine and then moving to Bob Reese. And we will begin with Carol Valentine. You are first up.
Thank you, Chair Kelly, members of the board. My name is Carol Valentine, and I am commenting today on behalf of the more than 70,000 members and supporters of the Oregon Chapter Sierra Clubs regarding the Western Oregon State Forest FMPs. We want to start by thanking you for your many hours of volunteer service. The FMP needs to be strengthened to bring management of our state's public forests into alignment with what our children and grandchildren need for a livable future. The plan needs to move us toward an ecological model of management that considers and protects the full range of values from a forest. If ODF focuses on merely complying with minimum legal requirements and maximizing timber outputs, we will fail future generations that are counting on us to give them the best chance at adapting to the challenging conditions that await them. The science is clear. We don't have much time to change. The FMP needs to do much more to address climate change and biodiversity through specific management direction and clear benchmarks for increasing complex forest habitat and carbon storage and sequestration. The plan fails to even mention the ODF's own climate change and carbon plan. Key performance measures are lacking critical detail for a plan that is expected to guide operations for many decades. The plan also needs specific safeguards for what we often label ecosystem services. But what a remote and impersonal term. Some of these ecosystem services are basic ecological functions that sustain all life. Abundant, clean water, cool enough to sustain the natural communities of species that rely on our forest waters. Water for human communities that will face increasingly drier waters and Reek Salas said it well. Every morsel of food, every sip of water, the air we breathe is the result of work done by another species. Without them, there is no us. We are at an ecological crisis point. Please don't waste the opportunity that the FMP provides. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. We'll reset our timer and we'll have Bob Reese begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Kelly, members of the board. I'm hopeful you're able to see a short slide deck that I've provided Hillary. Basically 4 slides. I'm Bob Reese, representing the Northwest Guides and Anglers Association. Really just giving, once in a while, give a report to the board of forestry members about how our sport fisheries are performing on the North Coast. As a 28-year professional fishing guide, things are not going well for us in Tillamook County. I quit bringing my customers to Tillamook County in 2020 due to the lack of opportunity that currently exists for wild and to some degree hatchery populations of salmonids in Tillamook. Hopefully you're able to see my first slide. It simply says that in 10 short years and starting in the late 90s, 5 of the 6 wild runs of salmonids were off limits to us for consumptive harvest. Wild steelhead, wild chum salmon, wild coho salmon, wild cutthroat trout, wild spring chinook, all closed to consumptive opportunity in those 10 short years. Joining the list in 2022, wild fall chinook were also not available for wild harvest. Of note, if you are able to see that slide, the species that are dictated in red have extended periods of residence times in freshwater ecosystems over summering, causing a great deal of mortality associated with warm water temperatures. In 2022, when the fall chinook season was closed, it was due to a cryptobia outbreak in 2019, also due to poor water quality in the basin. Hopefully you're able to see the second slide there. It shows the water temperatures on the Trask River above Gold Creek. When water temperatures exceed 60 degrees Fahrenheit, we start having warm water disease associated with those warm waters. 70 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 21.1 degrees Celsius, dissolved oxygen levels are greatly depleted and mortality happens within a matter of hours. I've talked before this board on the third slide extensively about the numbers of water quality limited systems on the North Coast. That slide shows how extensive temperature limited streams are in the Tillamook and the Nehalem Basin. Finally, the final slide is shows the value of sport fishing to anglers on the North Coast, worth about $18 million in 2008 for freshwater fisheries, 26.4 million in saltwater fisheries. And I'd just like to close by saying, when making management decisions on the public lands owned by all Oregonians, I urge you to realize that fish are a forest product too. And the community that I'm representing doesn't qualify for unemployment or disaster relief, and our members are hurting greatly. Thank you for your time.
Testimony providers, we appreciate your participation in today's board meeting. Chair Kelly, State Forester Mokomoto, members of the board, that concludes the public forum portion of the March meeting agenda.
Well, that was uncharacteristically short for testimony here. Haven't seen that in a while. We've got a moment. Any comments on that from board members? If not, we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is item 3, governance for the Board of Forestry, board policies manual adoption. And this will be a decision item. Before we begin this item, I want to acknowledge the time and commitment made by both staff and the board to complete this draft policy manual that's being presented for the board's consideration and approval. As a part of this work, the board and department will begin incorporating good governance practices within our administrative and organizational processes. hopefully optimizing our effectiveness as well as overall performance. As part of this work, we are slowly instituting some of these practices, like posting our board meeting calendar a year out and checking for conflicts of interest before the board votes on a decision item, to name a few. So with that, I would like to ask if anyone has a conflict or an appearance of a conflict on item 3. Didn't think so. Not hearing any. Okay, great. And hearing none, Cal, are you ready to proceed with this?
Yes, thank you, Chair Kelly. For the record, my name is Cal Mukamoto. I'm state forester. And I have with me Clark Seeley, and he's been the driving force directing the development of the board policy manual. When I first took this job, Clark and I got on the phone, and Clark used to work for ODF, and I'm sure everybody remembers Clark. I knew him since then as the heading up the SAF, Society of American Foresters. And I also heard rumors that he was doing these board policy manuals for other organizations. And we talked a little bit about that. Turned out we liked the same books about it and the same theory about it. And I struggled in my career getting board policy manuals. And then recently I just got on the board, well, not recently, it's been a while, on Southwestern Oregon Community College, which also has a board policy manual. And I saw how effective when we do implement board policy manuals, how effective the board is. And they stay as a policy board and don't try to tend to get into being a management board. But so without any further delay, we are here today to look at the final draft after many hours, right? Many hours of looking at wordsmithing, and Clark has been our leader in helping us with that. And so I'm going to let Clark take it over from here. And then Clark, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Kelly and State Forester Mukamoto and members of the board. I'm Clark Seeley. I'm the president of Seeley Management Consulting, and I'm here today to help support the board's efforts with agenda item 3. You have the material, of course, in front of you for this agenda item. It includes the staff report plus 3 attachments, the final draft of the proposed board policy manual for the board, the July 2020 board governance policy that is in place currently, and then finally an initial implementation overview, kind of a 30,000-foot flyover overview of initial implementation. As Chair Kelly said, and State Forester Mukamoto said, the purpose of the agenda item today is just to update on the process, where we have come since October, and to provide for your consideration for approval and adoption of this final draft. You'll remember that following the October 2023 planning retreat in Medford, the work group convened to develop draft version 0.7 of the BPM, which incorporated all of the discussion points that the board collectively agreed upon during the October retreat. And that was the version then that we used as the basis for both the public comment period, as well as the ODF staff engagement, and then finally the legal review. We did open public comment for 29 days during December and January. We received 1 comment. It was a kind comment for the board in terms of your work and your diligence, but the comment didn't provide any specific input to the draft for changes or modifications. So no changes were made based on that public comment. As far as staff review and comment, I met virtually with the ODF leadership team in November, and had time on their LT meeting agenda to do kind of an overview and then an update for the leadership team in terms of the process and where we were at. Had some good discussion with the group on that call. But again, that didn't result in any tangible changes to the draft at that point. And then in addition, during the public comment period from December to January, we also sought informal review from ODF staff on the draft at that point, and received about a dozen comments. Most of those were incorporated in the subsequent version. Some of the comments were actually reiterated in the legal review that we also conducted. To kick off the legal review on December 11th, State Forester Makamoto and Hillary and I met with Miss Annika Marriott, who is the board and department's general counsel with the Oregon Department of Justice as an assistant attorney general. We had a great meeting, I thought, an opportunity to kind of lay out what we were doing and the reason why, and what we were seeking from her in terms of the legal review of the board policy manual at that point. She delivered her review in January 8th, and provided what I considered to be an excellent review and substantive comments for us to consider. And I just want to give thanks to Ms. Marriott for her work and her review. Virtually every comment that she provided to us, we incorporated in the subsequent version of the board policy manual, with exception of one that I mentioned in the staff report, and that related to the role of the board administrator. And I think it was just, I think it was a little bit of a misunderstanding on her part about which position was actually being referenced there. So, and it didn't materially change the board policy manual draft at that point. Her comments provided a really solid foundation for the subsequent draft, and kind of fell into two groups. There were proposed or recommended word, phrase, or sentence changes that really kind of more fully helped the BPM harmonize with kind of the Oregon statute or administrative rule language. And that was quite helpful. And then secondly, she had a couple of suggestions and recommendations for the board to consider down the road related to the administrative rules that define the duties and powers. And now I use that term because that's the term used in the administrative rule, the duties and powers of the board chair. And in particular, she wanted to note that it would be helpful if the administrative rule was updated to provide the notion of the board chair being able to appoint board committee chairs, for example, whether they're standing committee or ad hoc committees, and also the ability of the board chair to appoint a vice chair for the board. And again, those literally can be handled in a simple update of the administrative rule. It's 629 Division 10, and literally with probably a one sentence addition to the rule in those cases. So based on the legal review and the staff comments, a subsequent draft was prepared, and the work group met again then to consider that near final draft, and produced version 0.9, which is the version that's included in your material for today. On page 3 of the staff report, you see the recommendation, which is to approve and adopt this version, this final draft version, as your first official version, and then at the same time to rescind the July 2020 current board governance policy. And then in addition, as attachment 3, there's again a one-page overview of next steps for the next year or so. So I'll be glad to turn it back to you, Chair Kelly, and State Forester Makamoto for the process.
Thank you, Clark. Great. Cal, anything before we go to see if we have any public comment? Anything else? Okay. Okay, Megan, do we have anyone signed up for public comment on this item?
Chair Kelly, State Forester Mukomoto, and members of the board, we do not have anyone signed up to provide testimony for item 3.
All right, unless there's any further discussion, I'll ask for someone to present a motion.
Chair, I had a question. Ben Doimling for the record. Clark, thank you so much for putting this together. Maybe this is a little too technical for this, but since we have some time, I wanted to ask, there's a couple references to ex officio. That term is being used when it comes to the standing and ad hoc committees. I think ex officio is meant to mean a member who does not vote. But in looking through the definitions, both in Robert's Rules of Order and in the dictionaries, that was not the definition that I found. And wondered if maybe you had some clarity or whether it would be worth adding clarity to what that means. Yeah, that was one of my questions.
Yeah, Ben, that's a great question. And you're right. Current Robert's Rules of Order does define it fairly specifically. In broader common understanding, it's exactly as you suggested, and that is that an ex officio committee member is a part of the committee, can engage in discussion and review of materials with the committee, but does not have a decision making role for that particular committee that they are ex officio. I think that certainly I think we can insert a simple definition of that type, what I've just described, into the BPM where it first occurs, and would be glad to do that if that's the pleasure of the board.
I would appreciate that. And based on my reading, I think of what I found, that would be very helpful. The other little comment that I had was on section 3.3 when it refers to orientation. I'm a big fan of that orientation. Some of that is, however, referenced orientation that would happen prior to appointment. And that would happen at the level of the governor's office, I think, not at the level of the board or board administrator, which I think would be very, very useful. But I think that probably would need to be called out in here, and that resides with a different entity than the board.
Yeah, Ben, I think we did have some discussion both in the work group, and I believe we actually talked about that during the October meeting as well. And we did modify the original language for 3.3 about that the pre-official appointment engagement. I think the intent here is to, quite frankly, to be sure that a nominee or a candidate for a board position fully understands what's involved and what they're potentially saying yes to in terms of acceptance of the role. I think that at least in the expectations of the process within the BPM, you note that 3.3 ends by referencing the board approved new member orientation package. And the intent, I believe, that we talked about in Medford in October was that this notion of sharing information with a proposed candidate through the governor's office would be kind of fully defined within that orientation package document.
Thank you.
I think if I could just add one point of commentary on that, I totally understand the point you're making, Ben, and the potential concern that may arise in the process of the governor's office considering candidates and so forth. And I know that the board certainly would not want to get itself inserted into a process that wasn't appropriate. But I also think that, as you've said, and many other board members have said over the years, that it would have been helpful to know what the circumstances and the parameters going into the process are for a prospective board member before that time comes. So there may be some important back and forth with the governor's appointment staff as we consider rolling out the board orientation package language over this coming year.
Yeah, Joe, just for the record, I think this is a great document. I think we've made a lot of progress here. Clark, thanks for all your work. I'm ready to make a motion, Mr. Chair. I'll go ahead and move to adopt the Oregon Board of Forestry Board Policy Manual as presented and rescind the Board's governance policy issued July 22nd, 2020.
I'll second.
Would we want to, I think Ben is suggesting that we adopt this with the addition of a simple definition of ex officio. And would you, so you would make that motion with the addition of that?
Yes, I would, Mr. Chair. Yes, I would, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Joe Justice. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Senator Ferrari has seconded it. So we have a motion to approve and adopt the Oregon Board of Forestry Board Policies Manual version 0.9 as presented in attachment 1 and rescind the board's governance policy dated July 22nd, 2020, presented as attachment 2 with the addition of a simple definition of ex officio. Okay, I think we all agree we have a motion and a second, and so if you can all prepare to vote on this motion. And that I'll do a roll call. Liz Agpawa.
Ms. Ekpawa enthusiastically votes aye.
Carla Chambers.
Aye.
Ben Doimling.
Aye.
Shonda Ferrari.
Aye.
Joe Justice.
Aye.
Brenda McComb.
Aye.
And Jim Kelly, myself, I'm an aye as well. So for the record, we have a motion that was made by Joe Justice and seconded by Shonda Ferrari. And I'm going to restate that motion. The Oregon that the board has approved and adopts the Oregon Board of Forestry Board Policies Manual version 0.9 as presented in attachment 1 and rescind the board's governance policy dated July 22nd, 2020, presented as attachment 2 with an added definition of ex officio. Hillary makes me do this, restate all of this stuff. So I apologize for all that I put. So we have passed that. The motion carries, and a huge congratulations and thank you to Clark. As I mentioned before, kind of entered into this process myself, kicking and screaming, and you have gotten us there, and we thank you very much. Are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, the screen changed.
Okay.
Clark.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Chair Kelly and members of the board, I also want to say congratulations and also particularly want to say thank you to the staff, certainly to Hillary and Ryan, the key staff from the beginning, to Annika Marriott for her work, and obviously to the development work group, the BPM development work group that was Chair Kelly, board member Ferrari, Cal, Hillary, Ryan, and District Forester Teresa Williams. And I just really appreciate the diligence and the hard work. It's been an honor and a pleasure to work with you. My contract does have some provision for helping ODF with some of the initial implementation work. And we'll pass that baton, over the next couple months as we move forward. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to the actual implementation of this board policy manual. And for anyone who is interested, this document will be posted to the About Us webpage for everyone's reference. And with that, we're ahead of schedule. Let's take a little break. And I think if we return at 2:40, that gives us a nice break and enough time. We might even give Commissioner Sweet and friends a couple extra minutes when we get back. With that, we're adjourned for 14 minutes. Too bad we don't have one. All right. Okay, we're going to go to. Yes, we do. Thank you. Yeah, I've been a little confused on that as well. Okay, we're back in business. The next item on our agenda is item number 4, Vision for Oregon Forest Update. Joy, you were going to help us with this. Are you here, Joy? Oh, there she is. Joy, we are ready.
Good afternoon, everyone. For the record, I'm Joy Krozik. I'm ODF's Public Affairs Director. I'm also serving as our agency's executive team sponsor for completion of the Vision for Oregon's Forests, formerly known as the Forestry Program for Oregon. So today I just wanted to update everyone on short-term and longer-term timelines related to completion and implementation of the vision document. I handed out some updated ones based on conversation with the subcommittee this morning and moving some timeframes around. But really just wanted the board to be aware of what work is, what work's coming down the line in the next couple months for both the department and the board, and then what the department's plan is for operationalizing the strategy in collaboration with the board. So the timeline that's got some, I'm gonna say bubble looking things, is short term. It's the next 3 months, and it outlines the steps that the board and department are going to be taking leading up to the governor's June 24 deadline for agencies to submit a current strategic plan, which she laid out in her expectations after taking office. So at a really high level, we've got various input collection points coming over the next about month and a half, culminating with a discussion of kind of the thematic elements of that input, along with what Oregon's Kitchen Table discovered through their community engagement efforts. So planning for the board's April retreat to discuss all of that input and have the final combined board and executive team conversation around what is this strategic framework? What does this vision document look like? We get to May finalizing the plan, and then June, the board's vote on it and the department's submission to Department of Administrative Services and the governor's office. So super high level overview. There's still a lot of work happening, but we are nearing the finish line because we've only been working on this for like 2+ years. So getting closer. So post-adoption, there's a huge body of work that still needs to happen for us to actually implement this plan and operationalize it at the division, program, field element level. There's also some partnership work with the board as far as developing progress measures, which I know a number of board members have been really interested in. Once we have this framework adopted and there's that shared agreement on goals and strategies, then we can look at, these are our agreed upon goals. How do we measure progress toward achievement of those goals? On the department's end, we'll also be looking at revising our annual operations planning internally. to align with the vision document. So that way everybody's heading in the same direction. We'll also be looking to the board for input on what you all would like to see as far as regular progress reports on how we're doing, where we could use assistance. And then we have, I'd say, about almost 2 quiet years before recommended initiation of a review of how are things going, how current and up to date and reflective of the current climate the vision document is. We can obviously push that out further if it feels like, yeah, we probably don't need to revisit it just yet. But I set it kind of on the short end, just so we can stay aware of, we will need to revisit it. We will need to revisit measurements, goals, strategies, hopefully because we're checking them all off the list and achieving them left and right. So that's the goal. I'm also proposing that in addition to regular reporting on the overall status of implementation of the vision, that we also look at incorporating a process where we can bring the fiscal year operating plans to the board for awareness, for transparency of, you know, here's what we're envisioning the next year looking like, and here's how it all connects to the vision for Oregon's forests. I think that's all of the high level stuff. It's not super exciting, I'll admit. As far as timelines, I probably should have went earlier in the afternoon. But I'd be happy to answer any questions board members might have on next steps. Thank you.
Thank you. Now's a chance if you have any other questions or anything, comments? Okay. Okay.
Great, thank you.
With that, I think we're done there. Thank you very much, Joy. We'd love to. You're all here. Yeah, well, I know it's before 3, but if you can start, that would be great. Well, we'll move right to it. So next up is our Forest Trust Land Advisory Committee testimony, and I think Commissioner Sweet will lead us, but my understanding is we have you've 5 different folks that are going to testify here. So I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. There'll be 5 of us testifying this afternoon. I'll let each of the people testifying introduce themselves. I'll start off. I am Chair Kelly, members of the Board of Forestry, State Forest Mukomoto staff. My name is John Sweet, Coos County Commissioner and Chair of the Forest Trust Land Advisory Committee. Alongside me today are other members of the Trust Land Advisory Committee here to fulfill our statutory responsibility to advise the Board of Forestry and the state foresters on matters which affect management of the state forest lands. Board members, the 5 of us are before you today, as our understanding is that this will be the last opportunity we have to address you before the HCP vote occurs tomorrow. We understand our time is limited to 15 minutes, and we will do our best to stay within those parameters. To start, I am saddened that we are not here today testifying in support of the prepared draft HCP. Since my first trust land meeting almost 11 years ago, we have been hearing about habit conservation plans and why they're important. Counties have testified many times, both before the board as well as stated publicly during the trust land meetings, the need for an HCP. We agree that an HCP is needed to ensure compliance with the Endangered Species Act. The problem we have with this draft is that we do not believe this plan, as drafted, is the right one for all parties. The board entered into this conversation on the heels of revenues, historic revenues, to ensure certainty of two things: financial viability and enhanced habitat conservation. I think everyone would agree the department has delivered on enhanced habitat conservation, but we seem to have forgotten the first point, which again is financial viability. There is not and has not been certainty for the counties during this HCP conversation. The counties do not have faith that the department will harvest the volumes projected in the FMP modeling report from December. Board, as you will hear from my colleagues, counties rely on these revenues for our daily operations. We have relied on them to run our schools, public health departments, elections, public safety, and special districts. I'm going to depart just for a second from my script. I'm going to talk about schools. And we've done a study about where most of these revenues end up. I've always thought that they receive something less than a third of the revenues. The schools, the counties distribute money to schools in such a way that they probably end up getting a bigger cut of the whole pie than does even the Board of Forestry. This is a lot of money. And we fortunately have a safety net in the state called a school equalization plan. But this is going to put a burden of millions of dollars upon that plan. And I hope the people that run that know this and have those resources. There are a few school districts, small rural districts, who actually get more money from harvest revenues than they will from school equalization. Losing these revenues, which they do because they're right in the middle of where all these cuts are being made, will frankly jeopardize the existence of those schools. The Oregon statute is very clear. FTLAC shall advise the State Board of Forestry and the state forester on the management of lands and on other matters in which counties may have a responsibility pertaining to forest land. The board and the state forester shall consult with the committee with regard to such matters. Counties were simply not provided a seat on the scoping committee. We were not provided a seat on the steering committee. If the department is going to be making decisions on the lands that were deeded to you for management by the counties, counties should have a voice in those decisions. Helping to put the plan together to ensure counties would be in support would have been warranted. Counties should have been present today asking for the support of a plan in which everyone was lined up behind it. Unfortunately, this is not the case. Board, we are happy to take your questions at the end. I would like now to turn it over to Commissioner Bangs, Clatsop County Commissioner and District 2 Representative on FTLAC. Courtney, are you there?
I am. Thank
see you.
Board, for the record, my name is Courtney Bangs, and I am Clatsop County Commissioner and the representative on FTLAC for District 2, Clatsop County. This HCP will negatively impact directly or indirectly all FTLAC counties. The negative impacts will be particularly severe for Clatsop County. The development of an HCP is a tool for ODF to comply with the Endangered Species Act, is something that many can agree with. The approval of the current draft HCP is not. Clatsop County and Tillamook counties are among the most dependent on the state forest for revenue to fund social services and to provide family wage jobs. Instead of trying to develop an HCP that protects county services and jobs in all FTLAC counties, ODF and the board have continued to push a plan that leaves most in need with the least. ODF noted that since the release of the draft HCP, it has seen no information and has heard no testimony that would cause it to change the HCP. That is even after seeing projections of drops in revenue for Clatsop County close to 40%. ODF originally pitched and pushed the HCP as a plan to gain regulatory certainty at the cost of about 10% of the harvest. Now ODF is preparing a plan that reduces harvest by more than 3 times that original projection, with no further explanation and no clear analysis of how the plan meets both the incidental take permit issuance criteria and maintains greatest permanent value. It's ironic that the state forester's recommendation to you is to discuss trade-offs to inform the setting of performance measures for the FMP. But the department has been unwilling or unable to discuss trade-offs inherent to the HCP. My view is that the trade-offs in the proposed HCP are now too large. This HCP isn't right for Oregon State Forests. In addition, Trustland County commissioners are also very concerned about fires and forest health. In the past few years, many western counties have been greatly impacted by large fires, primarily on the unmanaged Forest Service land. I'm worried that the same fire risk these lands pose to my community will be posed by the state forests because of the HCP. I fear that the limits on forest management will result in a buildup of fuel that will result in larger, more devastating fires. I'm further concerned that the limits on road management will reduce ODF's ability to respond to fires once they start. As a county that is 87% forest land, this is extremely concerning. Lastly, ODF will give up the ability to manage state forests for the forest health concerns after 30 years, as the lands inside the HCAs cannot be managed after that time. I can't see what benefit it provides to the people of Oregon for ODF to walk away from half of the state forest lands and not be able to respond to urgent needs or maintain forest health. In southwestern Oregon, we have seen Forest Service lose the ability to manage forests, and we've seen the consequences. Large swaths of dead and dying forests across the landscape have created fuel for future conflagrations. Developing a plan that would put more communities at risk by forcing ODF to walk away from managing these lands isn't right for the state of Oregon. I would like to now turn it over to Commissioner Magruder, Columbia County Commissioner and District 3 Representative on FTLAC.
Thank you, Commissioner Bangs. Good afternoon, board. For the record, my name is Margaret Magruder, and I'm a Columbia County Commissioner and representative of FTLAC District 3, Columbia, Clackamas, and Washington counties. Well, first, we all know that counties receive 63.75% of the revenues generated, and that the department's State Forest Division receives the other 36.25%. However, counties, as has been pointed out, don't receive this full 63.75%. We share it with school districts and special districts in our communities. On average, counties only keep 17 to 20% of the harvest revenues. 60 to 70% goes to the schools in our communities to ensure that the rural portions of our state have the same opportunities as those in the urban areas. The remaining funds are provided to special districts for their general operations. Furthermore, the HCP will cause a reduction in the revenues going to schools, which in turn will see programs cut, staff being laid off. In Washington County, one of the 3 that I represent on FTLAC, they allocate 68% of the revenues generated through harvest to schools. Based on the December model, Washington County is looking at a projected revenue reduction, and a significant one. In 2022, Washington County received $13.3 million. The best case scenario for Washington County in the modeling report would cause the schools to receive a 66% reduction from 2022. The department can't be left out of this conversation either, as 36.25% of all harvest revenues are allocated to the State Forest Division. In fiscal year 2023, the Department of Forestry harvested approximately 204 million board feet. ODF retained 34.6 million as their share in the revenues generated. Assuming the log prices will remain roughly where they are, with a reduction in 50 million board feet, it would not be possible for the department to remain operational with such a decrease in revenue. They'll need to seek funding from the legislature. This would be the first time that a self-sustaining division of the Oregon Department of Forestry would seek ongoing, perpetual funding from the legislature. However, if the legislature is presented with an option of allocating more revenues to schools, because as I pointed out, the schools will be significantly impacted, or funding the Department of Forestry, my guess is the legislature most likely will choose the schools, as they have a constitutional requirement to provide the necessary and adequate level of funding to the K through 12 schools in Oregon. Board, there's a way to ensure that the department, schools, counties, and special districts are not all going to the legislature with their hands out in the future legislative sessions. Take the time needed to adjust this HCP recommendation. Counties have thoughts and ideas on where you can make the small and necessary tweaks to ensure financial stability for all parties. Please, board, do the right thing. Help us to keep our communities afloat and operational. I would like now to turn it over to Commissioner Will Tucker, Lynn County Commissioner and District 4 Representative on FTLAC. Thank you.
So for the record, I am Will Tucker, Lynn County Commissioner, so just down the road from you, an FTLAC representative for District 4. So I'm Lynn, Benton, Polk, and Marion counties. In that role, I'm elected to represent and speak for over 700,000 constituents and the residents of those 5 trust counties. The HCP reduces the harvest, and I'm going to use a 10-year average harvest, which is the number we've been working with the governor's office as we've been talking about conversations of 250 million board feet as an average. And we've seen the high of 300, we've seen the low 202, but 250 is a pretty reasonable 10-year average. And when I look at the model report as released to us in December of this year by ODF, it says the revenues, I'm sorry, the volume now might be 162 to 181 million board feet. That's significant in job losses, which is what I want to talk about today for the trust land counties. So how many jobs will be lost as the harvest levels falls by 69 or 88 million board feet? So going from 250 down to 162 or 181. The analysis of the draft EIS pegs the number of lost jobs as 3 per million board feet. And I worry that that might deliberately but certainly without deliberation, without being deliberate, it certainly hides the true impact. The Bureau of Land Management, in a study done here in Oregon, estimates, this is 2022, estimates there were 13 jobs per million board feet, 13 direct jobs supported per million board feet. An analysis done in Washington State by Washington State University of federal and state data shows there's 15 direct jobs in Washington State, both of those compared to 3. The Washington State one went as far as to also say that there is, on top of that, induced or indirect jobs. And so it's 36 jobs actually lost per million board feet. That study also said in Washington State that each million board feet represented direct wages, not the indirect, not the induced, but direct wages of $917,000 per million board feet of lumber. So if we apply those numbers to Oregon, so what happens? Well, we'll see a loss of direct jobs of 1,035 direct and a payroll loss of $63 to $81 million. If we also consider the indirect jobs, it changes from 1,035 to 3,170 jobs. Additionally, there'll be job losses from the reduction in county and special district revenues. So as those come, people will be laid off, those jobs will go. We've already started to see some of this impact. Harvest levels have been dropping. So the last couple of years, the harvest levels have been going down. As ODF has preemptively started to implement some HCP-like practices in current annual plans. 3 mills have recently announced closures, resulting in the loss of 183 direct mill jobs. This doesn't include the lost jobs of trucking, logging, the other indirect, the road builders, the surveyors, all the rest of those other jobs, just in direct jobs. So without a local supply of logs for local mills, we'll see higher prices and more lumber being imported from abroad, be it Canada, Europe, or South America. But it's the loss of these family wage jobs that reverberates and hurts me the most in my counties. Through this loss of family wage jobs, they're losing health insurance jobs. They'll be losing and killing their retirement plans. Communities that today are proud of what they believe are environmentally sound jobs and proud of their heritage of supplying the wood that build the homes of Oregon, they'll be out of a job. The job loss means the end of careers, changes of college education plans, divorces, and suicides. I've been a commissioner long enough to see that happen as we've gone through mill closures. The cost of this plan will be borne by the family units affected, and they will be severe for many, many people. If implemented without change, the HCP will cause job losses that will damage small towns across Oregon, lead to the destruction of some families and communities. I ask you, board, please reconsider a right-sized HCP. I'd like to turn now over to Commissioner Scar.
Let me just interrupt for a second. Luckily we're ahead of schedule because you guys are well over the 15 minutes at this point, given the importance of the topic and your testimony. And the fact that we're ahead of schedule, we'll continue here, but we'll please try to wrap it.
Thank you, Chair.
You bet.
Thank you, Chair Kelly. I appreciate that. I would hate to be the one who got cut off. Board, for the record, my name is Erin Scar, Tillamook County Commissioner, and I am the Vice Chair of FTLAC. FTLAC is comprised of Benton, Clackamas, Clatsop, Columbia, Coos, Douglas, Josephine, Klamath, Lane, Lincoln, Lynn, Marion, Polk, Tillamook, and Washington counties. I thought it was important to remind you that there are 15 counties, over 130 cities, and tens and thousands of Oregonians that rely on the revenue from these forests for their everyday lives. The purpose of FTLAC coming before you today is to try one last time to express to each of you the impact that this decision will have as presented. You heard my colleagues talk through a variety of impacts that we expect. One, we are disappointed we were not at the table to help put it together. We are looking at what will happen to schools, what will happen to jobs. We are looking at the sustainability of the department itself within this harvesting plan. There was a letter that came out today, or I think it was today, from the governor talking about the work we've been doing with the governor. And I hope that you've all had a chance to see it. If not, you'll understand what I'm speaking about when you do. And she expressed her optimism that we can find a way to replace that revenue. I want to address that just briefly, because as I sat here today listening to your government relations individual talk about their experience in the legislature this session, a tight fiscal environment, I believe is what they said, and that there was an ask for 3.5 million from the general fund that was turned down for your department. So I appreciate the governor's optimism, I really do, and we are committed to continuing to work with her, but it's a very frightening space to be sitting in as we think about the loss of revenue to not only the counties, but also the department that comes with this plan, and looking at the wing and a prayer that it will be the legislature that refills that for all of us. So that wasn't my testimony on my paper today, but just listening today, that just really struck me. If we couldn't find 3.5 million, where will we find the 35 million if it were to come out of the regular projects? So I will go back on target and just say the purpose. So we talk about the HCP, and we believe in an HCP to be in compliance with the ESA, but we don't understand why this is the right one. The loss of revenue really says to us that it likely is not the right one. Tomorrow, if you decide to move forward as drafted, our communities and the department will not be the same. More mills will close. The counties will have increased expenses that frankly, we don't know how we're going to fund. And the department itself will have operations that it does not know how it will fund. At the end of the day, I think we can all agree that we need to do what is right. Hopefully, you will see that what is right is taking time, making changes to ensure that our communities will not be left behind, that the department will remain financially solvent, and that we as partners can sit down at the table together to find that solution. We thank you for your time today. And again, we ask you to please reconsider the state forester's recommendation, make the changes that are needed to this plan so that we can create one that all parties agree to, one that produces harvest revenues we need to stay operational, and habitat numbers to ensure that protected species have what they need. There is a way to ensure both here. We ask that you take the time to explore it. This is a 70-year commitment that we're talking about. This is a legacy that every single one of us sitting in this room that's a part of this process will be leaving behind. Let's leave behind something solid, something financially sustainable, and something that creates the protections that are needed. Let's find one we can all agree on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the testimony. Board members have any questions for any of the commissioners? Comments? Go ahead, Carla.
Thank you very much for your testimony and for your, financial numbers. That's really an area that I have been focusing on, is what's the real economic impact here. And, that same thing hit me today with the legislature. They couldn't fund 3.5 million, but tomorrow, as we talk of dropping these harvest levels to 162 to 181, target 167 million, that's an $88 million biennial ask. For over the life of this project, we're talking 3.08 billion without interest. So this really begs a question of how does this thing get funded? Will, I appreciate your comments because we're not measuring the multiplier effect of the impact of those mills going down or the reduction of those logs going through and being available. And, we talk about the job loss and we talk about, but we're not talking about the 500 or 600 to 5,000 vendors for each one of these mills. The multiplier impact of manufacturing in these rural economies is just so fragile. And, when we lose one of these economic engines. So I appreciate your work. I think we need to further develop the multiplier impact beyond the job loss because it's very real to these rural economies. So thank you for your observations, and we will continue to work with you to, do everything we can because I know we get it. Thank you.
All right, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, Joe, just for the record, I don't know what commissioner talked about this through K through 12 education. It might have been one of the commissioners online talking about the effect of, as you've looked at the funding model, I think, John, you talked about this a little bit, and analyzed where the monies go. And we have a couple districts that receive beyond the standard school funding. Which is fantastic. I served 12 years on the Grand School Board, just recently went off of it. I'm pretty familiar with state school funding. And there's something called the quality education model that, school boards and the school system has really been trying to advocate for. We underfund schools in Oregon. I mean, we absolutely do. That's not without question. That is something we underfund. And as you guys have looked into this funding and where these monies truly go, I think it's fair to say a reduction in funding affects all children. And isn't that fair? I mean, you guys have plugged into that and looked at that. And I'm just, I just wanted to make sure we point that out. I think it's fantastic. We have districts that are able to fund themselves beyond what the state apply. They reach, close to the quality education model. And they've analyzed this, what kind of funding does it take to provide a quality education for school kids? And unfortunately, most of our, virtually all of our districts in Oregon are not funded at that level. So I guess, you know, you looked at that, John, I mean, but that's a fair statement, isn't it? I mean, a reduction in funding of state lands truly affects all, K through 12 education. Is that correct?
So, Board Member Justice, so yeah, I was a school board member for years. So as this money's decreased, there's equalization money that will go about. The trouble is the equalization money, when you lose this state and county money coming in, they cannot find new sources of revenue. They've got to go back to the legislature themselves to ask for more money. So when we decrease funding to Jewel or to Lacombe or all these little small communities, then in fact, we will have more demand placed on the Common School Fund, which will drain and lower the amount of money going to Portland. So you're correct, sir.
Other board questions, comments? Courtney, I understand, looks like you have another comment.
Well, I was just going to answer Board Member Justice a little further with some local information, like the Jewel School District. They receive over $5 million from state lands. If they were to be pushed onto the equalization fund, they would receive less than $2 million, and they would no longer be allowed to be able to operate. And they are a community's central location. They harbor their health center there, and basically every activity that occurs up in their community. And I agree with Board Member Justice. When there's a reduction of anything fiscally in regards to schools, it impacts them all. This will impact ESD. This will impact 4-H extension. We recently had a natural resources awards dinner, and proudly over the last 3 years, we have raised over $425,000 for our school districts for all classes like ecology programs, and FFA programs and fisheries programs. My greatest fear after this decision is that us raising $150,000 a year for those kids from the natural resources community will be greatly impacted, and we won't be able to give to those who they're learning. The amazing things that these kids do with those funds within these clubs and within like the Seaside Ecology Program and the Warrenton's Fishery Program and the Astoria FFA program. It's huge. And so I just fear that these losses, the trickle down effect is going to just be horrible for us. So thank you for your time and thank you for your comments, Board Member Justice.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we're well aware of the circumstance that the Jewel District is in. Any other comments? If not, we really appreciate this. Is a great testimony that you are all here today. And with that, we will conclude item number 5. With nothing further, I want to remind the board that we will be returning tomorrow for the second portion of this public meeting, and we will be prepared to begin at 8 a.m. And with that, this 6th meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
On behalf of the counties, I want to thank you for your extra time and for your questions. They were very meaningful to us. We appreciate it so much.